All right, let's get into the monthly market stats here. And I'll just start off with a brief summary. And the board is saying, thanks to steep pullbacks in the apartment condominium sector, total sales in Calgary are down about 17% compared to May of last year. So there were about 2,568 sales. Now, this is still well above long-term averages, just not as hot as it was the last few years. And again, we are down 17% year over year. And I am definitely noticing this in the condo sector. If you are a seller in that market, it's become a bit tough. I'd say we're probably still in a balanced market, but we are turning into a buyer's market if we follow that trend, specifically for the condo sector. I'm finding single family homes are still quite good though. And in terms of new listings, definitely we are seeing a big increase in listings throughout Calgary. 4842 new listings, up 11.6% year over year. And there's a good little note here that I'll read out. Compared to last year, easing sales and rising inventories are consistent trends across many cities as uncertainty continues to weigh on housing demand. However, prior to the economic uncertainty, Calgary was dealing with seller market conditions, and the recent pullbacks in sales and inventory have helped shift us toward balanced market, taking the pressure off prices. So basically, Calgary has been booming the last few years, but now with all the uncertainty in the market with the tariffs and whatnot, things are starting to balance out. But other markets in Canada, they were already struggling before all the tariff talk. So that makes us a bit different in Calgary. We're going from a red hot market into more of a balanced market versus other cities in Canada were in a bad market to begin with, and they're getting even worse now. And the next section here, we're seeing divergent trends in the Calgary real estate market, where we have single-family homes, detached homes, and duplexes are doing quite well. And townhouses and condos are really starting to struggle. Way more inventory, taking longer to sell, price reductions, expired listings. So we're seeing two different paths. So you can't just label the entire market as one way. You have to look at your own specific neighborhood, product type. But we are starting to see some real differences between the different sectors and different areas of Calgary too. And if we look at the total inventory, 6,740 listings, up 97.5% year over year. Huge number. Months of supply, 2.62. This is up 137.7% year over year. So when you take these two stats, sure, it looks a bit crazy, up 100%, up 137%. But we're actually comparing year over year. And this time last year, we were in red hot seller's market conditions and there was no inventory. So we're basically going from zero to having some inventory. So it's not as bad as it might look. It just depends how you interpret the stats. But 2.62 months of supply is actually pretty good. I would say that's still a balanced market. And you'll find some sectors in Calgary are still in the seller's market. So it depends on your neighborhood and your product type. And if we look at the actual numbers, the total residential price down 2.5% to $589. This is the average of all these product types. Single family, $769, up 1%. Duplexes, $697, $300, up 2.8%. Now, somebody asked me, why is the semi-detached price so close to the detached price? And I think the answer to that is there's lots of brand new duplexes that are bumping this stat up. There are some older ones that aren't this expensive, but you will find a lot of infill duplexes that are brand new that are quite pricey. And I think that's bumping up the overall duplex prices. Townhouses, 453, 600, down 1.9%. And the apartment sector, 335, and that is down 1.5%. Now, when you're looking at the year over year stats, I find it's a bit easier to look at them side by side like this. So if we look at last year versus last month, so last year's May, there was 3,090 sales versus 2,500. New listings are up 4,300 to 4,800. Inventory from 3,400 to 6,700. So real estate is just supply and demand. If there's more inventory and less sales, prices should level off and even decline over time. Months of supply was 1.1 last year, and this past month it was 2.62. And sales to list price ratio, this is the number that you can expect when you list your property. How close will it be to list price? Last year it was over list price, 101.55%. Now it's about 98.55%. So people on average are not writing full list price anymore. And it depends on a bunch of different scenarios, but overall it has dropped by 3%. Days on the market went from 19 to 32 days. And I'll just show you the median price, 562, 500. It's actually gone up to 590, 250. So that gives you a good summary of the year over year numbers. And I'll give you a regional breakdown of our prices in Calgary. So in the city center, the average price is 596,500, down 3.2%. This is a deceiving stat because there are lots of condos in the downtown area and they're bringing down the average number. But if you're buying a single family home in the city center, it will be much higher than that. The west side, average price 729,600, up 0.3%. The only part of Calgary that still has positive numbers overall. The rest, as you can see, they're all down numbers. Northwest Calgary, 650,400, down 2.2%. North 550, down 3.9%. And the south and the southeast are always kind of a similar price, 586 and 579. They're both down 1.7% and down 2.4%. Big number for the northeast, down 5.1%. Average price 500,300. And the northeast is really struggling across all product types right now. So down 5.1%. And the east side is the most affordable part of Calgary, down 3.3% to 427. And this graph, I think it's important. It's like a big picture graph. If we look at the start of COVID, we had lots of inventory leading up to COVID. That's the blue line is the months of supply. COVID hit and we had just a radical shift in our market in Calgary. Lots of buyer activity, lots of migration to the city, and the inventory dropped. And now we're seeing it tick up again. So the green line is the average trend line, and you can see it dropping, and now it's coming back up. How far this goes back up, nobody knows, but the trend seems to be over where it was, dropping like crazy, hardcore seller's market conditions. That party seems to be over, and now we are looking at maybe more balanced conditions going forward. And I'll just briefly talk about the detached and the apartment sectors and how they're performing throughout the city. So basically, Calgary is broken up into different regions. As you can see here, we've got city center, northeast, north, northwest, and so on. But each part of Calgary is not, they're not performing uniformly across the city. Different areas have different things going on. But what is uniform across the city right now is the northeast part of Calgary is performing the worst. So if we look at the year-over-year benchmark price change for the detached homes in Calgary, I'd say that they're kind of flat for the most part across the city, except for the city center, it's up 2.8%, and the west side doing very well, up 3.74%. But northeast Calgary is down 2.66%, and the rest are kind of flat. And what's interesting about this, the west side is doing very well, but on average, the west part of Calgary is the most expensive part of the city. So I'm a bit surprised to see it doing that well still. And the northeast part of Calgary is going to be one of the more affordable parts of the city. And that area is doing quite poorly at the moment. So my guess is there's lots of new builds happening in the northeast, and maybe they're putting pressure on resale prices. And you can also see how it's playing out with the months of supply throughout the city. So if we look on the west side, only 2.13 months of supply. Northwest Calgary, 1.64. These are pretty hot markets still. But if we go into the northeast, 3.91. So it's turning into a more of a balanced into a buyer's market in the northeast. And if we look at the apartment sector, the year-over-year benchmark price change is almost down across the board, except for the west side. So if you hear the news, oh my God, the condo sector is doing terrible. Well, it might be depending on where you live. If you're on the west side, it's not doing that bad, up 1.54% year over year. And 3.29 months of supply. So it's still fairly balanced, but it's not a terrible market. But the rest of the city, lots of negative numbers, minus 4.51% for the northeast part of Calgary. And the months of supply, almost 5 months. So that gives you an idea. More inventory, prices are dropping. Now, this is just a quick snapshot of what's happening in the market. Just to give you a brief summary, there's probably 10 more pages in this stats package. I'm not going to bore you with it. But you can get the general idea. There's more inventory coming to the market. Things are balancing out. I think the days of the red hot seller's market are over. But you still, you can't be too cocky if you're a buyer, because I sold 2 this past week, 2 listings, and they both sold in like a day or 2 on the market. And there was more than one offer on both of them. So you have to be prepared to compete if you're a buyer. If you're looking at something that's in the affordable price ranges, still lots of buyers for that. So if you're a buyer, things are becoming a little bit easier, but you still might have to compete depending on where you're looking and the product type. And if you're a seller, I think the days of the hardcore seller's market are coming to an end. Things are balancing out, but you can still sell fast if you do everything properly and price it well. have great photos, hire a good agent. You can still definitely sell quickly. It just, you won't probably see lineups out the door and 10 offers like you saw maybe a year or two ago. So things are still good, just balancing out. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you on the next video.